On this episode of Around the Outside, Ian and Mike bring a solution to sprint race weekends. Kick back, relax, and enjoy the show.
You're listening to Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast with your hosts Ian Shea and Mike DuPont.
Want to grab another one? Okay, hold on. All right, you know what? We'll just get it kicked off. Mike is going to do a bit of a wardrobe change. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast. We have a wonderful episode for you today. Because there isn't any racing going on does not mean you don't need to listen to an F1 podcast. There is always something happening in this sport, and we love Formula One because there is always something happening. On or off track, you have to pay attention, and I think that the off-track action affects the season more so than a on-track issue. If we can talk about, I don't know, what's some off-track drama, Mike, that you can think of that affected Spygate 2009 or 2008, excuse me. That fucked McLaren for till 2023, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, caused certain individuals to be banned from the sport forever. Whenever you're banned from something for life, it's totally something kind of major happened for that to occur.
Oh, so dude, I've had an awesome, back-to-back couple of days. For those of you who were looking at Instagram yesterday at ATO_USF1, I was throwing up on my stories, Mike. I went to New Hampshire Motor Speedway with Terrell Covey. He was a interviewee. Is that how that interviewee a couple weeks back? And during the interview, he goes, Ian, I'll take you to some of our closed wheel racing, some of our homegrown racing. And he gave me the shout. I was totally in. And bro, I was blown away by the dedication of the teams there. And I was also blown away that New Hampshire Motor Speedway is a national circuit for NASCAR. And the differences between an infield on a Formula One circuit and a NASCAR circuit, and it might just be this one. This is my perception for right now for NASCAR infields, but dude, it was staggering. When you're looking down the pit lane in Formula One, what do you see? Just perfection, technology, money, individual garages. You have plate glass going all the way atop the pit lane for people to walk. At New Hampshire Motor Speedway, the pits where they're fixing the fucking NASCARs, it's like a cinder block building with a tin roof. No shit.
Yep. I've fond memories of New Hampshire Motor Speedway. My father raced spec racer Fords for some 25 plus years, and a lot of the events were there. I remember being there as a young lad. But it's definitely a nice place to be. Definitely some good racing goes on there.
Oh, dude, what was cool to me was that the people there were taking it so seriously because it is a competitive event. And at the same time, you shake a driver's hand and you think, oh, I think this guy's a carpenter during the week. You look at, that's what I found to be amazing, is that these guys are just normal people, but the talent that they have in driving is immense. We sat at the turn one grandstand, and these guys are bombing in at 110, 120 miles an hour. And it makes you appreciate how talented a Formula One driver truly is. Because these guys all have a moment when the spec racers or the modifieds come out. Each and every single one of them has a moment coming out of exit. Their rear ends get loose. Their draft is messing up. The outwash, same effects that you have in a Formula One car. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, I'd probably be in the wall right now. I don't think I could correct that and save that. And those guys are. And they have a 40-hour-a-week job that's not racing. It's really impressive. And one thing that I also loved seeing was it was a group of guys that brought their company truck that towed the car to the track, and they've got their Snap-on box that they brought from home, and they're racing hard. It's really awesome. And if you guys have the ability to go check out a short track race, or you can go to New Hampshire Motor Speedway and see the event that I went to, go, because it really is something special to watch. And oh my God, Mike, the modifieds, you ever see the, remember the car Kevin Magnussen drove in Drive to Survive with Tony Stewart?
I already know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So the modified, they're just like a babier version of that. Bro, when they go around, you feel the exhaust in your chest.
Right.
And it's a carbureted. It's a carbureted engine too.
Yeah.
And the guys were, it was so much fun. And Terrell, again, brother, if you're listening, thank you so much for thinking of me and taking me there. But Mike, I have a newfound appreciation for homegrown racing. It was.
Yeah, that's definitely a very cool place, whether you're going there for the NASCAR events or to see, some kind of closed wheel, open wheel series that may not be professional. You're going to have a great time at New Hampshire Motor Speedway.
Oh, yeah. I had a great time Thursday night, too, hosting the Gravel Trap F1 team. The hosts, Caroline and Christina, and their producer, Buck, came on. And, Mike, I feel very fortunate that they agreed to do that interview with me. I think that the insights that you had from them gave me a different perspective of the sport. And I also think that the insights that they gave them credibility too, because at one point in time, Christina was talking about how there's a differentiation between what upgrades come to a car. There's upgrades that just fix the issues, or ones that push performance forward. And being a Formula One fan, you're a Formula One fan. I think that shows the level of interest and knowledge that they have, because that is a distinction I believe a 2-3 racing person to Formula One can't make. You know, like to have to understand that the car performance is such a fine line, because the Formula One cars, even the shittiest one, still goes 200 something miles an hour.
It's still faster than any other car in the world. Yeah.
You know, and I just think that the energy that those two had during the interview, I'm still blown away by the fact that they've only known each other for 2 months, which is wild. Which is wild to me, because their chemistry was friends forever. We've known each other and watched Formula One for forever. So if you guys, when you're done, listen to this episode, go ahead and check out that interview. It is not a waste of your time, because you will learn something like I did.
It was definitely a great listen. Highly recommend.
What's up with the sprint weekend, Mike?
We got some F1 news, ladies and gentlemen.
Woo!
Some exciting events have been unfolding in the F1 world. The F1, FIA, and all 10 teams got together before the race weekend in Australia and floated around an idea to tweak sprint weekends. Ian, you and I have talked about sprint weekends on this podcast before. We've debated whether they should change it, how they should change it. I do think the change that 10 teams, FIA and F1 have been debating is a good change for F1. It's an exciting change. And here's exactly what it is.
Break it down, baby boy.
We're talking about starting this at Baku. Of course, Baku is our race in a few weeks' time. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, our current format, or the format we had been doing at sprint race weekends, are Friday, free practice 1. Session 2 is qualifying. The qualifying sets the grid for the sprint race. On Saturday, we have FP2, followed by our sprint race, which sets the grid for the Grand Prix, the finishing order. And Sunday, we have our race. The proposed format limits practice to 1 session.
Oh.
Friday, FP1. After FP1, we have qualifying, which sets the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Saturday is sprint day, baby. We have sprint qualifying as the opening session, followed by the sprint race. So no longer does the sprint race impact the Grand Prix in any way. It is a separated entity. I imagine we would keep the point scoring the same. I, for one, think this format is significantly better than the current format. It checks a lot of boxes for me. For new fans trying to get into the sport, FP1, FP2, FP3, I can understand why you wouldn't want to watch it. It's a lot of the same thing. You know, we have moments where no cars on the track for 10, 15 minutes. Like, I completely understand F1 debating limiting practice sessions. This new format limits it to 1 session, which is very sparse, which is definitely a con. But that sets up teams that maybe aren't at the top to make a more significant jump to get closer to the front. And maybe teams that are at the front, like a Red Bull, perhaps they don't have as much time to set up their car. They screw up a little bit in regards to setup. The data is telling them something that, you know, isn't actually reality for what's going to make the car faster, give them a better race. And they are moving further back the grid. I really like this change. Ian, I know you've been a big fan of keeping things the way they are. You don't like sprint races. I really don't like sprint races for the fact that it wasn't really a race. It was just a concession to make sure that you stayed in the same place you qualified in. How do you feel about this?
I think we have a very good litmus test for reduction in practice sessions. There's in Australia or even Saudi Arabia, the conversation of let's start getting rid of practice sessions was in play. And it has been those 2 races, 1 race, I can't remember exactly. It was a large talking point, and there was support from drivers in the paddock about having a limited amount of practice sessions, even eliminating altogether. So this will be a good litmus test, and I think the teams will be able to find out if they can actually have only 1 practice section. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited for the changes made because my second biggest bone to pick with the former sprint race weekend was FP2. There was quite honestly no point in having an FP2 session during a sprint race weekend because once you hit quali, you are in Parc Ferme. Mike, for our listeners new to Formula One, what is Parc Ferme?
Parc Ferme essentially locks in the setup of your car. There's very few things you're allowed to change. Those things are your front wing angle and tire pressures. Moderate change to your tire pressures. That is it. So one of my big questions for this, Ian, is when can we modify the car and how much can we modify the car after FP1?
That is why I had such a bone to pick with that FP2 session in the sprint race weekend, because you couldn't modify anything. Teams would have to decide between 3 different setups, I would think, because you had the quali, you had a sprint race, which is you could maybe even call that almost an FP3 long run or an FP2 long run,
Right.
because and then you have the full race where you're higher on fuel and things like that. So there was a lot to sort out without being allowed to sort anything out. So I like how when we keep and with this proposed weekend, I like how you hit Parc Ferme and it makes sense to stay in Parc Ferme. I also like the fact that I'm saying like a lot more than I thought I would. That there's a sprint.
I'm
weekend.
liking it a lot, Ian.
Yeah, there's a sprint weekend. It's a day. Excuse me. It's completely separate from the race. I appreciate that distinction between the two. That makes me feel like this makes sense now. And it also makes sense because you're giving entertainment value to the fans. It's checking all of Stefano Domenicali's boxes. I think that it's hitting all the team requirements that they wanted out of a sprint weekend. And I think for the fans, it's really going to engage them in the action that is Formula One, which I'm really happy for the sport. However,
drum roll, please.
I think Baku was a horrible choice to have a sprint weekend. I think that the 2 qualies in a row with 2 races in a row detracts from the sport in a way that you don't pick up on in the practice sessions. And I say that because in the practice sessions, when there is that downtime, you do get valuable information from Ted Kravitz, from Sam Collins, from Jolyon, from anyone else who's commentating. And if you have Jenson Button as a pundit, they are able to dive deep into issues that are going on in the track or the mentality of a driver. And when you are focused on the race, I think that you'll miss some of those stories, some of those talking points that are a makeup of Formula One. I also fear that we are going to be moving more towards a race centric instead of a Formula One centric community, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that if you only care about the races, you're not please don't mistake that as me saying that. Everybody has something that they love about Formula One. And I think for those who love seeing the cars just pound laps and listen to commentators are going to be missing out on things. What do you think about Baku, though, as the first?
I don't care as much about the venue. The sprints are a third of whatever proposed race distances for the Grand Prix. I think a good sprint, you need to have overtaking opportunities. So perhaps somewhere like Monaco, where there's less overtaking opportunity, isn't the best location for a sprint. For me, that's probably the only really important factor. Something I really like about this scene. Right now, when we sit down to watch a Grand Prix weekend, FP1 through 3 qualifying the race weekend, how important is FP1?
I think it's the
how impactful is it? How important is FP1 really in the grand scheme of things? You don't get it exactly right. It's okay. We're going to take a 2-hour break and we're going to go back out for FP2.
I think
now, with the sprint format, FP1 would mean something. That's your only window to set up the car before qualifying. The qualifying that sets the grid position for Sunday's race. And I think that's really cool. It's FP1 could more or less, how many times have we seen an FP1 or an FP2 sessions where the cars don't even go out on the track because the conditions are poor, or they're not representative of what the race is actually going to be?
And then they end up giving themselves one practice session.
Right.
Okay, this is making FP1 way more exciting. I agree with you. But what about the quali to quali days? So, Friday night we have quali, and then Saturday morning we have quali. Do you not think that will just promote yesterday's quali again? Like, my concern is that if you have Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes on Friday, you're going to have that same order in the grid. So is this quali to quali more for the midfield of
That's a really good point, Ian. And obviously we don't have all the details of
correct
just exactly how they're going to do everything. It would be nice and interesting if they found a way to make the qualifying sessions different.
Yes.
So we keep Friday's qualifying the same as it's always been. The sprint qualifying, make it a different variation. We've had instances in the past where we have one long session or multiple long sessions, and you're free to just go out and set time, not segment it up into, Q1, 2, and 3, but yeah, I think it's a really fair point. Maybe if they plan on keeping it the same, the thing that would differentiate Friday's quali from the sprint's quali is, okay, we had FP1, we had some ideas about what would make our car fast. We had our first qualifying for the race on Sunday, the actual Grand Prix. And there were some aspects about the car that we think we can change and get a better result. We think we can pull out another couple tenths on our competitors. So sprint qualifying is that opportunity to make those tweaks and potentially change the way that the qualifying on the previous day shaped out.
I think, what if they lifted Parc Ferme Friday night?
I think they need to change Parc Ferme.
I
think that's honestly what it like. Okay, once I think that we can debate this, but when the sprint race happens, Parc Ferme.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
But so I'm sure like yourself, Ian, like our listeners, hi listeners, we all absorb and digest a variety of Formula One content, whether it be reading articles, listening to other podcasts. You don't hurt our feelings. We listen to other podcasts too. I heard Damon Hill with a really interesting take on Parc Ferme and making adjustments to the cars. Why even have Parc Ferme? Why not allow these teams to make drastic changes right before the race with the gamble that maybe this is going to change their outcome? Similar to what we're talking about from going from normal qualifying. We don't really have names for them yet, but Grand Prix qualifying, going to sprint qualifying and making changes to try to get a better result. Why not allow them to make drastic changes before the race as a gamble? Maybe that it could dramatically change the outcome for a team. Maybe it dramatically helps them. Maybe it dramatically hurts them.
That happened. That you have that happen from session to session. We've been seeing it with Mercedes. FP1, trash. FP2, great. And it would be great to see that in a race. I think that eliminating Parc Ferme would give what we want to see, because you're giving allowance, like you said, for those last minute changes. And there's already a ban on working on the cars overnight. You can't touch the car. I don't know from what time, but till 9:30 in the morning.
There's a curfew.
So what is the point if you can't work on it? So let's say you do your sprint weekend format. So it was FP1 quali. What do you have? A 4-hour window after that? 3-hour window to work on the car? And then you do quali and you have a 2-hour window. So I think that would be awesome to just allow them to work on the car, make those tweaks and changes. And the unpredictability of last minute changes too, Mike, that would be very exciting to see. I think we have seen that before. Remember, it was Hungaroring last year in the rain. Aston Martin was looking fast all weekend long. FP3 came around, they were podium position. Come quali, they got P18. That's because they fucked with their tire pressures by half a PSI. It's things like that I think we would promote and see if we eliminated Parc Ferme and gave teams a chance to work on their cars. Mike, I'm really surprised that I thought we were going to go into differentiating factions almost during this conversation.
No, that's a brilliant example, Ian, because that's just staying within the rules of Parc Ferme. That's something they're allowed to adjust. What if you allow them an infinite possibilities of things that they can change? How drastic of swings do we get? Right now, when we go into qualifying, the cars are done. They've tested everything. They went left. They went all the way right. They found somewhere in the middle. That's the happy ground. That's the way the car is going to be. That's what's fastest. I do think this format promotes, not that, I want to promote gambling. Don't gamble, kids. But it promotes the strategists and the teams to take a chance on something that really may dramatically affect where they end up, whether it be positive, whether it be negative. And I think that's a good thing for Formula One, and it'll make it exciting to watch. And I do like the idea that every session means something, Ian.
I really like the idea that everything means something with this session, and the infinite possibilities allows teams to go into a development rabbit hole. If you're allowed to just, if I just did a half turn here, a quarter turn here, gave 2 gigahertz of something to some computer, I think that would do it. Do you want to start a petition? Eliminate Parc Ferme? Well, if we eliminate Parc Ferme, I think we have grounds to stand on taking away a practice session as well.
Absolutely. Because you can treat that qualifying, you have your out lap, your hot lap, your in lap, and then you come in. So basically, for most qualifying sessions, a driver is going to complete 3 laps. The second lap is where they actually set a timed lap. That's data they can use to make a change in the car.
Yes. And it's live data. It's not a test run. It's right. I'm in it. I'm doing it. And you get to use that live data. With what gets me about sprint weekends too is the sustainability of parts. With, what do we have? 3 engines or 2.5 turbos for an entire season. One reason why I brought up Baku is that it's a very large track. There is going to be a high amount of stress on the engine because it has at least a mile straight on the way home. How do you think the teams are going to be able to combat the sustainability with the increased pressure of wanting more and more races? Because 2 quali sessions back to back on an engine, transmission, drivetrain, all that is a lot of stress for a Formula One car to handle.
Yeah, and maybe it changes the calculations for the FIA and F1 for how many parts are acceptable to go through over the course of a Formula One season. It's our same debate again, Ian, about is having a limit on parts good for F1? Is the strategy for certain sessions you want to turn things down with the hopes that you can make your parts last longer. The other strategy is, no, let's go all out. I don't care if we have to take a penalty or two. If we finish a place or two higher in the races that we're not starting from the back, maybe theoretically we get more points over the course of the entire race season. I mean, it's a strat. When F1 has already limited so much of what you can do in regards to race strategy, it's one of the things that I like they still have, even though at times it can be boring. Like, we all want to see, even though we'd love to see a battle at the front, we don't want to see Max just going 75%. Like, because he knows he can take care of components and make an engine last longer and make sure his gearbox lasts the entirety of what is it now, like 7 or 8 races before they can make a change without a penalty. So that's a good question, Ian. Does this change the formula for, can we realistically expect to last the entire season with 3 ICEs when we're pushing the car significantly harder than we were in our FP1, FP2, FP3 format?
I think F1, FIA are going to have to make some concessions in that area about giving the teams more power units. And we think we slightly agree on how many people could get. Realistically, you can't have what they had in the 90s of just bring 5 engines for one day. You can't. That's not right. That's wasteful. It's something
not
I
with
would
the
love
cost
to see.
cap, Ian. Not with the cost cap.
No, you can't do it. But they're going to need to do something to accommodate the extra stressors that these sprint weekends are. And I think that we're going to be seeing more of a shakeout. Obviously, we're going to have to, because I don't think it's a bad idea anymore with these sprint weekends coming to Formula One with this new proposed layout. Like you said, it's action every day. Every session means something. And that's something that I'm now looking forward to even more because of that perspective you gave me. So thank you for that, Mike. I'm not 100% convinced.
Neither am I. I mean, I've debated, like, would it be best to swap around a few sessions? Like, would it be best to do, swap, for example, sprint quali and the Grand Prix quali, so they can use sprint quali as more of a, okay, FP1, we do our race testing. Sprint quali, sure, we're qualifying for something that matters for points, but we can still fine tune some things. And then the next day we have the Grand Prix quali. Your car better be right. So yeah. I'm sure there's iterations, variations that could potentially change it, make it better, make it worse. But just for that one simple fact, that statement that we've been discussing, it makes every session mean something. And that's never something that Formula One's really had. No. So it's cool. And if every session means something, that's going to cause better commentary. All the interactions on the track will be more impactful. The teams will have more to discuss or argue about what a driver or what a team is doing. Your statement earlier about I'm fearful that having less practice sessions will detract from some of those things. I'm hoping that having every session means something will actually enhance all of those aspects of commentators and analysis having more important and impactful feedback, rather than, all right, it's FP1 and we got one car on the track. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah. I think, I guess I should have said, setting the precedent that the Formula One weekend is an all-out blast, an all-out charge from the second you get on track to the second. And it is. I'm not saying it isn't, but that's why I brought up the sustainability of the components, the sustainability of the cars, because you can't keep that up an entire season long without doing something. And that's what I hope that the viewers who are coming into a sprint race weekend for the first time, I just don't want them to get their expectations up, because that's not what it's going to be on a day-to-day basis. They took away
but it could be, Ian.
It could.
It could be, Ian. And could it be as simple as every team gets one extra component for all these parts? You get just, one extra ICE, one extra controller, just across the board. And the FIA increases the cost cap to meet that increased cost. Plus $500K for leeway.
Agreed. I think that's what they would have to, if we were going to give it every weekend like this, and instead of doing a third of a race, make it, a quarter.
Right. Before, the F1 community, F1 population, F1 fans, I think were very split, not exactly 100% on how they felt about sprint weekends.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe this is going to universally improve the sentiment on sprint weekends based on what you've already said in this podcast. Before you did not like them. Now you're like, okay, like I can kind of see how this could be good. So I think that's going to be a universal feeling amongst everyone that's an F1 enjoyer. So hell yeah. Let's go.
We're going to be holding hands across the paddock. I'm excited for Baku. Real quick, to just not beat a dead horse, reverse grids, that came up in the same conversation right around the same time as the sprint weekend started coming into play.
Nice.
That's one thing I never want to see.
Yeah, I know. Well, coming from it like a standpoint of like, let's say you're a brand new fan of F1 and imagine somebody who's never watched F1 before is sitting next to you. You're watching qualifying in the race together. And they start asking questions and they go, what's this session? Oh, this is qualifying. This is where they determine the order of the grid. Who's going to start at the front? Who's going to start at the back? And then tomorrow we're going to have the race. And whoever qualifies first is going to be at the front. And the person who's never watched F1 before scratches their head and goes, aren't they just going to pull away then?
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a true statement, and they do.
Yeah, a lot of the time that's what happens. So maybe there's some merit. This is an F2, okay? We don't have one race that's a shortened race, and then, what F2 has done historically, they'll have a qualifying session. The top 10 positions will flip. So if you finish the first race in 10th, you now start first for the following race, because I do 2 races per weekend. If you finish first, you're starting 10th. If you're any of the finishers below that, you start where you qualified it at. Essentially, you started 11th in the first race, so you're going to start 11th in the second race. So I think there is a happy middle ground where you don't have to have Max starting 20th.
Mm-hmm.
What if Max started 10th every race?
That would be interesting. That would be nice to see Max cutting through the field. I think it would be fun to watch. What I oppose to a reverse grid order is I just don't like the penalization of winning. That's what it seems like to me. Like, oh, you won? Go fuck yourself. That's one thing. Like, oh, you got first? Guess who's in 10th? I don't like that. That's kind of like why I had an issue with the wind tunnel allowances. If you get first, you get 90%. If you're last, you get 135, 125, like something like that. And it seems like you get penalized for winning. And I understand, because Mercedes really put a highlight on what happens when a team is a dynasty. Ferrari highlights what happens when you have a team dynasty, and you'll see the disparity of performance because the teams are if you're the winner, you're top dog, you get the most of everything, and that's
5x the money.
And that's one thing that I like about the cost cap because I think that was the proper way to eliminate. I hate saying it because I love me a dynasty, but it was a great way to eliminate a dynasty because you took away the prize money. You took away all those incentives for being winners. You could, how many sponsors do you want? Great. Give my budget $500 million. Awesome. And now you're like, oh, shit, dude, I only got like 125 to work with. So
Williams.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I mean,
so your cost cap, what are the pros of the cost cap? It tries to keep a more level playing field and a more exciting championship battle. It's reverse grid is the same exact thing.
Yeah, I just don't like the penalization. That's why I'm against it. If you're first, you're first. If you ain't first, you're last. You know what I'm saying?
Shake and bake. Shake and bake. The magic man. Now you see me. Now you don't.
All right, that's pretty cool.
I'm all hopped up on Mountain Dew.
I love the way they're talking to you, Chip, because they're winners. So, I mean, that's the only bone to pick with a reverse grid. But
yeah, and I don't want a reverse grid. I'm not trying to make it sound like I like qualifying meaning something. If we were to do a reverse grid, how the hell would it work? We're not F2. We don't do 2 races in a weekend.
Correct.
We're doing a sprint qualifying to try and separate sprints from the actual races. I'd really like to try this format out. But that's like the argument for it. Is okay, the cost cap is to equalize the playing field and create a more exciting championship battle. That is essentially what reverse grids would do. But how the heck would it work in F1?
Yeah, you couldn't. I don't see it fitting.
Like with the current dynamic, how the hell would we do it? I have no idea. So you're incentivized to come in 10th in the sprint race, so you can start the grid in first, like. Because theoretically, your chances of scoring more points are higher if you start first in the race. Versus getting max 10 points in the sprint. So like the F1 with the current format, they can't do it. But I guess that's the concept. Is that it's similar to the cost cap. It's a championship equalizer.
I think we're solving the world's problems here, Mike. I really am all about taking out Parc Ferme, though. I think that's the issue with the sprint weekend.
Yeah, maybe the sprint race is your last adjustment, or maybe they get rid of it altogether. I don't know.
I don't want to see that as much as I don't like them. I think they're on to something here. And we're gonna have to white knuckle evolutions. This is just such a time of change in this sport right now because of what Stefano Domenicali is doing, and he's expanding and growing. And when you grow, there's pains, and this is just going to be one of them.
I think it's a good change going all in. I think it's a good thing for the growth of Formula One, for the excitement of the sport. As much as we've all enjoyed sitting down and watching FP1, FP2, FP3, we can't kid ourselves. There have been times where it's been boring. There's been absolutely zero on-track action. This idea that every session means something is very exciting to me, and I'm looking forward to hopefully they implement this for Baku. I'm not entirely certain if they've finalized it, if it's just been talks. I really hope that they give this a go, because it would be really freaking cool if this worked out. And who knows, maybe eventually F1 decides this is going to be our format for all races moving on. But yeah, I'm excited. I hope you are too.
I'm excited. You know what I'm not excited to do is admit a mistake live on the air. Last week, listeners, I gave you a slight misinformation about Gunther Steiner. If you listened to the episode or watched it on YouTube at ATO USF, I said that he was calling bullshit on red flag. And in my statement, I can't remember exactly, so I can't quote myself exactly, but I said that Gunther Steiner wanted the FIA to get involved with Red Bull, and I was wrong. he said he did not want to have the FIA get involved in reining back Red Bull. That's the differentiation I need to make. I apologize, everybody, for giving you that misinformation. However, I do not fully apologize for the point I was trying to make, was that Gunther Steiner is still calling bullshit on Red Bull, and he's planting little fucking seeds of insecurities all in our brains about them. Mike, do you know why I think that he's doing that?
That's a tried, tested, and proven tactic. That's my opinion. Teams and principals have been doing this for years. You know, that's my opinion. You know, they'll plant these little seeds enough where it goes, you know, I think Ferraris, they're really fast all of a sudden. Maybe we should take a look at their engine. It's like, how about we don't do that? How about we just let Ferrari be fast?
That is exactly it. All team principals come out like they're this is great for everybody, for the sport. You know, it might not be 100% legal.
Wouldn't it be great if my team was higher up the grid?
Oh man, if only I had that one thing that Red Bull had. No, so I still hold the fact that Mr. Steiner is saying there's something wrong in that car, because I can't remember his quote exactly, but I put it up in what he said. But he went, "Oh, let's just give it a few rounds, and if it's not legal, we'll figure it out." The nonchalantness behind that statement is exactly what you said about 2 minutes ago, Mike. It's no, he's calling for, I think he's saying, no, there's not something illegal on that car. And, don't get involved yet, FIA. No, but listen to what I'm saying.
Maybe you might want to take a look. At the end of the day, they're all competitors, and they're looking to get any kind of competitive advantage they possibly can. And it's within their... Are you okay?
Dude, I'm dying over here.
It's within their bounds, what they're, with what they're allowed to do to make claims like these, whether they're right, whether they're wrong. It doesn't matter. Anything that can get the FIA to take a look, to audit the team, is always in their best interest. Because I may be wrong, but I believe the FIA, except for in the Ferrari case, releases some kind of statement about what the decision was, what the current state of the proposed issues were. You have the classic Braun GP double diffuser, where the FIA said, "Yeah, this is legal. You all can just do it yourself." And a few races later, all the teams had the double diffuser. Braun GP had big enough of a lead at that point where Jensen was able to win the championship. So, yeah, it's something that's been happening in Formula One for years, and it's probably always going to happen. You always want to try to find a way of getting the top dog off the top step, and yeah.
If I were to personally launch an investigation into the legality of the Red Bull car, the only thing I would look at is the DRS system that Red Bull has, the pass that he did on George Russell in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
What
does it just come down to having the best aerodynamics? Like, the Red Bull car always had the best aerodynamics, and is it just a matter of fact that, like, Adrian Newey is just a wizard, and their engine and all, the rest of their components are now just up to snuff or better than, Ferrari, Mercedes, now Aston Martin, and just their aero is just so much better, and it's always been so much better. That's always why they were so faster in Monaco and any circuit like that. They'd win a couple races every year, and they were always the aero heavy races. Where aero matter the most.
They probably, because Adrian Newey, they probably have like an airflow that's 0.5 millimeter lower on top of the car than everybody else, which directs it a millimeter lower over the rear wing. That way, when they open it, that's how they're allowed to get more drag, to put it that way. But the reason why I would launch an investigation is because I'm curious to see what it is. I can't, because Arrow is borderline black magic to me. How is it? It's fun to think about when you're in a car. The faster you go, the more it sticks. It's almost counterintuitive. When you think of, oh, I'm going faster, it's easier to lose control at this speed. But with Arrow involved, that's the only way the car is going to work.
Ground effects. Certainly are a wonder.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Buddy, I don't really have much else to discuss, except for Gunther Steiner is 100% saying, look at the legality of the Red Bull, without saying, look at the legality of the Red Bull.
I think I speak on behalf of all of our listeners. You are forgiven, my friend. I do have something else.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that we have something exciting to talk about for next weekend. So
okay.
I'm going to save it for then. So make sure you guys tune in to next week's podcast, where we have not yet a race to discuss, but we will have some more hot button issues, topics, debates about strategy that we can all look forward to thinking about and debating.
I'm very much looking forward to it because I have no idea what you're going to say.
I know.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm on a cliffhanger right now. Sylvester Stallone. No? Have you seen that movie? Have you not seen Cliffhanger? No. Yo, Adrian, I did it. One of the most famous lines in a movie, and it's, Yo, Adrian, I did it.
Yo, Adrian. Adrian.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in and giving us a listen. When you want to go to YouTube and watch the show, because you can, because we're now streaming them on YouTube, head on over to ATO_USF1. And if you want more Formula One content and you want to see clips from this show and other shows, please go to Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at ATO_USF1. And when you're there, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And also, reviews are awesome to have on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you could please just give a quick rating and let everybody know how much you love us, we would really appreciate that. Mr. DuPont.
Forza Ferrari 2024, baby. Don't lose hope.
2024.
Hang on.
Merci, gracias, obrigado, dankeschön. Cheers. Bye, y'all.